Welcome to another episode of Growth Hacker TV. I'm Bronson Taylor, and today I have Arjun Arora with us. Arjun, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you. Great,
Yeah,
excited to be here.
yeah, I'm excited to have you. I was looking at some of your other interviews online over the past few days, and you always give solid interviews, so I'm excited to talk to you here.
Thank you.
But Arjun, you are the CEO and founder of Retargeter. So let's start there. Tell us a little bit about Retargeter. What is it?
Yeah, absolutely. So Retargeter really aims to solve kind of one of the core problems in the online marketing world, which is a lot of folks are spending time, money, and energy driving traffic to their website, but unfortunately not a lot of those folks are converting. They're not taking the action that you would like them to, whether it's buying a pair of shoes or filling out a lead form, or frankly, in many cases, just remembering the brand. And so that's really the problem that we're trying to solve. And and over time, we've also helped folks with other kind of aspects of display advertising, which I'm excited to chat more about. But that's at our core is what we're all about.
Yeah, so kind of like getting qualified leads. Does that sum it up? Getting the right people on your site?
Getting the right people back to your site.
Right people back to your site. All right, let's talk about that a little bit, because on your website, it seems like you break down your services into two categories. There's site retargeting and audience retargeting.
Yeah.
And maybe there's more than that. You can tell me if I'm wrong. But tell us the difference in site and audience retargeting.
Yeah, so site retargeting is when someone visits your webpage and then they leave, and then we're actually able to start to show that browser ads as they surf around the web. So let me give you a kind of a more specific example. Mm-hmm. So someone shows up at a online retail store. Let's say they sell leather bags. So you go onto the site, you poke around for a little bit, you decide, hey, this isn't the right time to buy. The next day you're on Facebook or YouTube or CNN or the New York Times, and you start to see ads for that leather bag company. And then you say, oh yeah, I was actually interested in that. Let me go back and make a purchase, or hey, maybe I'll tell a friend about it, or something like that. So can either encourage kind of direct action or kind of more social sharing or other things like that.
Yeah, so that's the site retargeting, right? So
Yes.
What is the audience retargeting? How is that different?
Yeah, it's actually called audience targeting, and basically what that is more the top of funnel stuff. So it's actually where we're able to show ads to folks for the first time. So rather than re-engaging someone who's already been to your site or who may already be familiar with your brand, we're actually able to leverage our inventory base and data partnerships to be able to find users for the first time. So let me give kind of a specific example there. We can, through the use of our technology, target, let's say, women in New York between the ages of 25 and 35 who are reading an article about finance on their iPads. Just kind of, and these are all kind of layering together different data segments. And that audience may not be that large, but we're able to find those folks across the open web to the extent that we can with the inventory and data partnerships that we have.
Yeah, now you said an important word there, open web, because we're used to that kind of granularity in like a Facebook ad platform. We're used to going there and choosing the specificity of ads for Facebook, but that's just for Facebook. You're saying I can have that kind of audience targeting across the open web, which opens up a whole new level of opportunity, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly right. And I think you hit the nail on the head. And I think that's where, a lot of what we're trying to do, a lot of education around, is that the ability or the possibilities with real-time bidding, and this is all done on kind of what we call RTB, or real-time bidding platform, which is the ability to buy display ads in basically a fraction of a second before someone sees the ad. And so it's all done in real time. It's all done based off of various data sets or insights about either the device or the inventory source. So if it's a site about finance or a site about soccer or whatever it happens to be, we can at least glean that information. So this is the big push into the RTB ecosystem, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. So that idea of them being qualified really is kind of the heart of the whole thing. It's qualified with site retargeting. It's qualified with audience targeting.
Yes.
So talk to me a little bit about how the really smart clients of yours are using your service, the smart marketers. What are some of the best practices around the retargeting or the audience targeting that are just kind of things you could put out there so if people use your service, they're using it with a little more knowledge now?
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of different things. On the site-based retargeting side, it's really, and this kind of holds for everything, but one of the things that folks often forget is the importance of the creative. I think people get really excited, hey, we're going to start a campaign, this is great, and then they just kind of send across something and don't put as much thought into it as they probably should, or don't send across variations. So I think that one of the key and probably simplest things to do to make your campaign more successful is actually just one, putting a little bit of thought into the ads, and then two, sending us multiple variants, because sometimes even we're shocked by what we assume to be the ad that will perform the best, and oftentimes we'll find out, well, it's actually not that one. It's it's this completely different one that we may not have expected. So those are things that kind of first steps or kind of first order principles that I would recommend is just make sure the creatives are are in line. The second thing would be around making sure to target or retarget folks from the right place. So it's often and segment the audiences as appropriate. So let me give a specific example. You're a B2B software company, you're selling a SaaS product online. For the folks who just visit your site for the first time and you want to retarget them, you want to show them ads that highlight the features, just get people back, have the logo very prominently, get people excited about, the product. Let's say someone then fills out a lead form and you have now their email address, and now they're kind of in the second stage of the sales process. Over there, you're really going to want to re-engage them with a different kind of messaging, which is, hey, come back, sign up, or maybe we have a special going on, or here's content that can be really valuable to you given that you signed up. And then, lastly, and this maybe applies more in the e-commerce world, is once someone has converted, then you can start to show them ads for maybe referring their friends and getting a discount, or joining your social media profile. So, there's other things that you can do to basically re-engage and bring people back into the fold in a way that, is respectful and helpful and adds value. And so segmenting the audiences, I think, is another important point. And then on the audience targeting side, one thing that I'd mention is it's really understanding, your audience. So I think, the old adage is know thyself, but in the marketer's world, it's know thy audience. So, the more that you can know your audience, the better you are. And I think that can help us craft a more targeted audience campaign. And oftentimes we also learn, and our clients learn from campaigns that they target as well, which is great. And that can help us further refine. But to the extent that you start with a strong hypothesis or set of hypotheses, that helps a lot, and that helps just optimize ad spend as well. Mm-hmm. But just to touch on one kind of quick point there previously, you can actually use both retargeting and audience-based targeting to learn a lot about your audience. So, for example, you run a site-based retargeting campaign, and then we can show you kind of in aggregate what were the URLs that the audience you have visited, and you can realize, oh wow, I never knew that my audience was on, I don't know, the Huffington Post or something like that. Maybe I should target, that site directly. Or, it turns out that a lot of my conversions happen from Facebook, so maybe I need to go back there. Or there's a lot of interesting insights that you can glean from, kind of targeting your audience and all the data that you get back from there. So that's another interesting point, I'd say, is to definitely look at the data. It's important.
Yeah, those are great fundamental insights there. And that last one you said, just to make sure I'm clear, it's somebody who's specifying an audience. So they're saying kind of, a woman, 25 to 35 on an iPad, doing whatever. Right. And then you're getting information about where they actually came from. So then it's new knowledge that you didn't put into the system. The system's feeding to you based on the specificity you gave it.
Exactly. So you learn even more. It's kind of a self-referential, and it's a pretty cool way to continue to garner more and more insights about the audience that you're targeting or that you think you should be targeting. So you may also learn that, hey, maybe that audience that you just described isn't actually the right one. Maybe we need to target somebody completely different. And so it's a great way to learn very quickly and frankly very inexpensively about different audience segments that you may want to target.
Yeah,
including the ones that actually visit your site and convert, which are often the most important ones. So
exactly. And as exciting as all the different aspects of retargeting is and site targeting, being able to learn new information to feed back into the data loop, that's what's most exciting to me, because then you can just, you can run so fast and improve so quickly. I mean, it's the whole lean startup, build, measure, learn. The learning is a huge part of it. So that's why I like that it's not, let me come to Retargeter, spend a bunch of money. It's, let me come to Retargeter and learn in the process. So that adds a new layer to it, I think. Give us an idea of how big you guys are today. And the reason I ask is because we're going to go into kind of your growth a little bit, but I want to give people an idea of anything that you've publicly released, users, revenue, numbers, anything out there to give us an idea of size.
Yeah, just on at a high level, we're kind of a double-digit million run rate, 30 plus employees. headquartered in San Francisco, and have been around for a little over 4 years now. So have scaled, and we're bootstrapped as well. So that hopefully gives some sense of kind of the core metrics of the business.
No, absolutely, and that's exactly where I'm going, is into the bootstrapped idea, because to have a double-digit million runway and then put bootstrap in the same sentence, something special is going on there, I think. And so how did you all manage to grow your user base so substantially without a lot of initial investment capital? Walk us through the early days a little bit. We'll talk about what it looks like today later, but early on, how do you get that flywheel going?
Yeah, I think the early days was, frankly, it's just a lot of hustle. I don't think there's any other way to describe it. I mean, I think we had and we still do, but we had an incredibly tight-knit, strong team of just folks who were gunning and working really, really hard. And, we would do email outreach. We would, go to conferences. We'd go to events. We'd talk to anybody and everybody. And we'd really just kind of help folks understand. I think education was a really big piece of it. We weren't trying to push our service on anybody. We're saying, hey, let us teach you about this awesome new technology and how RTB can be helpful to you and how retargeting can be helpful, and let's show you some results. And hey, if we can be helpful with anything else as well, let us know. Like, we're here to help. And I think that ethos was super valuable in the early days, and continues to be. It hasn't changed. And then from the technology and the product standpoint, we were just really scrappy. I mean, I hacked together literally the first version using open sourced, technology, and just mashing everything together to make it work. Of course, over time, we've continued to improve it. Now we've got a nice, solid engineering team in house. But over time, initially it was totally hacked together. Then we used an outsourced team to help us out initially, and over time have a strong engineering team in house that's cranking away. But I think just working hard, being helpful, staying scrappy, all things that I think were valuable.
Yeah, I've heard Paul Graham say that early on in a startup, when you're trying to grow it, you have to do things that don't scale.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that idea?
Absolutely, 100%. I could not agree with that more. I saw that article and I wanted to run over and high five Paul Graham, because I was like, got it. And I think that what that looks like specifically is does it scale for the CEO to talk to every single customer? Does it scale for the CEO to be out, 8 nights a week? But that's what it felt like. And so, just talking to people and doing that, and it definitely doesn't scale. But that's what gives the momentum and the traction. And I think then ultimately, to your point, gets that flywheel spinning.
Yeah, that's great. Now, so often when I think about a bootstrap business, at least, I think about lifestyle businesses. And when I think about VC-backed businesses, I think about, okay, they have real growth potential. How realistic is the Retargeter story? Because you guys took a little bit of seed funding, not enough to matter, and you're turning it into double-digit million run rate. Is that realistic? Do you encourage young entrepreneurs to try that? Or is that just something special happened there?
I think we got lucky. We worked really hard. We were in the right market at the right time. I think getting some cash early will it releases tension. It eases things. It's worth it. There are certain cases in which it works out, and I think if you're willing to really, really work hard, and if you've got a space where you can sell and you can monetize relatively quickly, that's where it may make sense. So, for example, in our case, within 3 to 6 months, we were able to start charging, and the dollar values were relatively high, and so we were able to start kind of getting some traction and making some money and moving forward. So typically that would have been, if you're selling a SaaS product for $15.99 a month, it's not going to work, right? And I think, we started off at $500 a month. Now we've got clients that spend significantly more than that, by orders of magnitude per month. And so, it's a different story altogether. But I think in certain cases it definitely does work and it's worth it. But even then, I would encourage folks to get at least some, meaningful capital out the gate. And I think these days, while it is still challenging, if you can prove traction by bootstrapping for a while, then it becomes easier to raise money.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your transparency and honesty with that answer, because a lot of times, once we've done something and we've succeeded at it, we look back to everyone else and be like, "Oh, it's easy. You could totally do it." When in fact, it may not be easy at all, and it's kind of the survivor bias, I guess. So I appreciate your perspective on how special Retargeter is, and so it's possible, but there has to be certain things in place. The amount of margin being one of them, and other things to really make it work. Now, over the years, you guys have evolved. If I have it correctly, you started out almost as pure retargeting, and thus the name Retargeter. But you've really broadened your services since then. What are some of the things you do now that you didn't do in day one and month one?
Sure. Some of the biggest thing is actually the top of funnel kind of stuff that we were talking about. In addition to that, we've been innovating pretty aggressively in the last 2 years, and some of the things that we're particularly excited about are email retargeting, CRM retargeting, short tag, which is one of our social products, and also we're one of the early partners on the Facebook exchange, and so we have access to retarget on Facebook in the right rail ads, and then also in the news feed as well, which are both pretty exciting things that frankly weren't even around when we got started. So I'd say top of funnel, new retargeting technologies, and then new sets of inventory, particularly on the Facebook side, which I think are most exciting, and also video. We have access to video inventory, which we weren't doing in the past. Real-time bidded video inventory, so we can do cool things like video retargeting. So you can come to a website, and then let's say you're watching a YouTube or a Vimeo or something clip, you'll see a 15-second ad before the video starts for the site that you visited, which is pretty exciting. So I think there's new retargeting methodologies, inventory, and then the top of funnel stuff.
Yeah, you mentioned email retargeting. I'm not familiar with that. What is email retargeting?
So email retargeting is pretty cool. Email retargeting is basically where you can re-engage folks who have opened an email. So, an email is effectively just an HTML, piece of code. And so we treat it, although it's different and requires some nuance, but we treat it effectively the same as a web page. And so we can actually place code in an outbound email that goes to a web-based browser. So for example, if folks are opening their emails with Gmail or Yahoo or a Hotmail, we're able to put a line of code there. And what that does is that if someone opens an email but doesn't click, we're able to start retargeting them. And this is actually really valuable for, let's say, old email lists that you have where people are still maybe opening the email, engaging, but they're not clicking through. Maybe one of these couponing sites or something where, that looks interesting, cool deal in San Francisco, let me open it up, but not going to click on it. And so for those folks, it's valuable.
No, that's great. How important has this kind of new suite of services been for you guys? Would you guys be close to your run rate if it wasn't for kind of broadening the services you all provide?
Yeah, it's interesting in that it's been helpful in a non-obvious way. So I think, while the percentage of revenue that is derived from these products is still somewhat relevant, is relatively low, what is interesting is that it often helps us open conversations. So, people are like, especially in some of the areas where things are getting crowded. For example, in retail, it's getting a little bit competitive these days. And when we can come in and say, look, we've really focused on innovation and not just on kind of these core site-based retargeting, but while we continue to improve that with optimization, we also have X, Y, and Z. And that's where people are like, oh, wow, you guys are ahead of the curve. You're optimizing. You're thinking about the future and thinking about different ways in which to be helpful to us. That gets people excited, and then they want to talk to us, and then they start to work with us either in site-based retargeting or in some of these new products. So that to me is actually one of the cooler side benefits of these new products. Granted, of course, that they are actually very helpful and valuable and drive ROI and all that other good stuff.
Well, let me ask you this. As a founder, you're always having to decide what opportunities to take advantage of. Because there's so many opportunities. There's so many ways you could innovate off the basic retargeting idea that you started with. How do you know when something is a good direction and an opportunity worth expanding into? And when do you feel like you're losing your core focus? Because I feel like founders deal with that a lot. I mean, we're drowning in opportunity, and what we say no to may help our success as much as what we say yes to sometimes. How do you make that distinction?
Yeah, it's a really tough one. I think one that I've been learning more over the course of the last couple of years, and I think the one way to do it, I heard someone say this recently, and it really stuck with me, is that minimize kind of all of your downside risk, or have zero downside risk, and have kind of infinite upside risk. And what that looks like specifically is don't take on something that would potentially cause harm on the downside, which would potentially destroy the business or hurt the business. But do little tests or say, okay, we're going to take 25K or 100K and test out this new product or this new marketing idea. And in 3 months, if we got some meaningful traction, great. If not, let's go back, right? And that way, the downside risk is contained and minimal in that particular case, where it's, okay, we're investing 50K in this thing. But the upside potential is potentially massive. So let's say it does get traction and, I don't know, this email retargeting product, for example, all of a sudden, oh, crap, everyone loves this thing and it's going, then all right, then we can keep reinvesting and then the downside risk is limited. But, betting the farm on something else is typically not a good idea. And, it happens and you don't maybe bet the entire farm, but you bet half the farm when you should only be betting a small tractor or something like that. Yeah. This analogy is getting out of control, but I think you get my point.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
No, that's great. It's almost like bringing the lean methodology into the features themselves and not just the startup as a whole. Exactly. Build, measure, learn in a small scale within the company as it grows and not just with the entire company itself. Now, you guys obviously help a lot of people acquire new customers. Like you said, you're focusing on top of funnel stuff, retargeting, all those things. But I want to talk about how you guys actually get your customers. Because it's always fun to see how you help others, but then also how you're helping yourself. And sometimes it's the same way, and sometimes it's unique and different, and sometimes it's a mix. So today, what are your primary channels for new customer acquisition? We know early on you said it was just hustle, things that didn't scale, the Paul Graham model. But as time goes on, usually things level out a little bit. So where are your customers coming from today?
Yeah, so we do a lot of content marketing. We're big fans of inbound marketing, so big fans of HubSpot and those folks and their kind of philosophy. So we do a lot of content marketing, and that's been very helpful. We rank pretty high for certain SEO terms and things like that. We continue to do kind of aggressive outreach to the right folks and using different tools to do that, whether it be through our inside sales team or through email marketing or whatever the case is. We're still always doing outreach, and I think if we do it in a way that educates and adds value, we've gotten really great response from it. In addition to that, we do kind of the traditional things like AdWords, and then of course we're big users of retargeting. So
that's what I figured.
That's an obvious one. But other things, and we still do things that quote unquote don't scale. But I think I travel quite a bit, and team members go to lots of conferences. We're meeting people in San Francisco in the evenings and at events and things like that. And while those things don't necessarily scale, to some degree they kind of do, in that if everyone does it and we've got a structure around it, it is kind of doing it at scale. So, and it has a good impact and it's valuable. So those are some of the major things that we do. And then, I think PR helps, and writing for different blogs, and contributing content, I guess kind of inbound, but more kind of outbound and on other sites. That's also actually quite valuable.
Yeah. What kinds of content have you guys created that's really worked out well for you? Is there any kind of content that you really found that when we produce this kind of content, the inbound links is just, greater, the inbound leads are greater?
Yeah, so one of our kind of most prized possessions in terms of content is just a very simple article. It's just, what is retargeting? And it's something that's that simple, and it really helps folks understand, well, what is this whole thing called retargeting? So there's that very core, simple, basic content. But then on the flip side, there's the more kind of niche content, which is, for example, how do mid-market e-commerce companies leverage retargeting and display most appropriately for the holiday season? Like, it's
very
super specific. Yeah, but it works, and it drives a lot of meaningful traffic and insight, and people learn from it. The right people learn from it, and that sort of content is also very helpful. So I think the really broad stuff that's written really well, that really helps folks to understand, is great. And then kind of the let's get as specific and help someone, almost even a small tribe of folks help understand something, and then that also gets a lot of link juice. It's the weird stuff in the middle that tends to just fall by the wayside.
All right, so that's a good insight to have, because that changes how you think about content. And I've heard you mention the word education a few times already, learning a few times already. So really, your strategy is to produce content that helps people learn things, but only super niche and super broad, not necessarily the middle where it's no man's land.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's exactly it.
No, that's a great insight. Now, what kinds of things have you guys tried that maybe hasn't worked for you all? Because, every business has its own makeup, and they try some things and it doesn't work. It's nothing wrong with the business. It just doesn't work for them. Anything there? Any war stories?
Yeah, I mean, I think AdWords, it's weird, but for us, we've tried a lot of different things, and we found some subsegments of it that do work. For example, certain keywords and certain terms. But by and large, on the whole, I guess we just expected more from the platform, but it just, maybe because things have gotten too competitive, maybe because the space is confusing, so people are advertising against terms that they don't really do. I don't know, whatever the reason is, it doesn't work, and we've spent thousands of dollars trying to figure it out. At the end of the day, it's maybe marginally ROI positive or slightly not, and ultimately in the long run, it works out because our clients stick on with us. But we just found that we can spend the money elsewhere, and it's more impactful. So that's probably one of the ones, again, for us that doesn't. And I know for other people it works just fabulously well.
No, I'm so glad you said that. Again, being transparent, because it gives me confidence when I hear someone who knows what they're doing and doing it well, and they run a retargeting company tell me that AdWords doesn't quite work for them. It's like, okay, I'm not a crazy person if certain things that work for other people don't work for me. And people need to hear that. Every company has its own path to growth, and you can't just do what everyone else is saying is working. It just may not work for you, and that's life. So it makes me confident knowing that you're failing at something.
Totally. And let me be even more real with you. And I'll say that for certain folks, retargeting doesn't work either. And I can, be frank about that. And I think, if you're selling a very low margin product and it's commoditized and it's a low dollar value, it's just not worth it. Right. Yeah. And it's, something that we wouldn't encourage you to, and we'll tell you on the phone. It's just like, hey, it's probably not worth your time. Now, if you're looking to build a brand, and you want to actually, you're willing to invest in the brand, then it makes a ton of sense. But if you're hyper ROI focused, selling a $5 product with a 5% margin, just don't waste your time. And there's other ways to make that work, but retargeting may not be one of them. So I completely agree with that, and I appreciate you pointing that out as well.
Yeah, and that's true with really any paid channel. If you don't have a really high LTV, paid channels just, you can't build a blog where you're going to sell eyeballs to advertisers, because there's no LTV in the visitors. You can't do ads to bring people to your blog. It doesn't work. You got to have something you're selling that's substantial to make that machine kind of work itself out. Now let's talk about y'all's culture a little bit. I've watched you online a little bit, like I said, and it seems like it's something that's really ingrained in the company there. It's not just a set of vision and values just because you're supposed to have them. It seems like it really is baked into the people there. So tell us first, what are the company values at Retargeter? What is it you try to get into your employees there?
Yeah, so a couple of, just a few of the values: respect, adaptability, intelligence, hustle, focus on long-term relationships. These are some of the things that we value, and there's a few more. But that's kind of how we think about the world. And I think it's important to have that set of values because it's a rule set by which you can live. And now it's actually really challenging to maintain those values and live by those values. And I've made mistakes. We've had folks on our team make mistakes in terms of either hiring people who don't fit the values or allowing people who don't fit the values to stay on longer than they should. And these are all things that we're learning and getting better at. But it's very valuable and very tough to execute on. But if you do it right, it can allow you to, bootstrap a company or build something large. And I think, but it's tough.
Yeah, and that's the point I really want to touch on, because on this show, I rarely, if ever, go into company culture. It's just not what we talk about here. It's not that it's not important. It's really important. It's just not our angle on everything. But as I was putting together this interview, I thought about it, and I thought, if values inform employees, it's almost like the algorithm that tells employees how to be. And employees are really your greatest resource in terms of growth. Without employees doing the right things, you're not going to grow. Then it seems like, transient property, that your values actually will lead to growth, just not directly. It just goes through the employees. Do you agree with that assessment?
101%. Absolutely. And I think that's, and it also, is important for the leadership team and the management team to operate from those values, because they're the ones who are instilling those values into the employees and the team, and then everyone kind of grows from there. And so, particularly as the CEO, I have to be very cautious and aware of that at all times, so that I'm leading by example. But yeah, it's so important, and it's easy to see. I guess maybe for me, but it's easy to see, for me at least, when there is values misalignment, how it kind of ripples through the organization. And when there is values alignment, not misalignment, but alignment, how it can have such a positive impact in the environment as well. So there's really interesting kind of opportunity to figure this stuff out.
Yeah, for sure. Now, let me ask you about two of your values specifically, because some of the ones in that list, hustle, every startup talks about hustle. Intelligence, every startup talks about intelligence. Those are the known ones that everyone kind of talks about, even if they don't really understand them.
Sure.
But there's a few here that you don't really hear about, or I haven't heard about at startups. One of them is adaptability, and the other is long-term relationships. I mean, that sounds like something you get in marriage counseling. It doesn't sound like the kind of stuff you talk about in startup culture. So talk to me about adaptability and long-term relationships here.
Right. Well, just to pull on that thread a little bit, it's interesting because, you're spending more time with your fellow kind of, startup teammates than you are sometimes with the folks you're married to. And so I think, I'm not surprised that you draw that analogy, but let me jump back to adaptability and long-term relationships. So adaptability, I think, is important, particularly in startup culture, because things are changing so quickly. There's a new technology out tomorrow that can help you do your job better. And if you're stuck on the old way of doing things, you're never going to be able to move forward and be more efficient. And so there's from the work process perspective, and then there's also from the industry perspective. So in our industry, if we weren't adaptable and we said, no, we're just going to do retargeting and we're not going to look at this other audience targeting or top of funnel activity, we would have missed out on literally millions of dollars in revenue, and we may have even lost customers because they said, well, you guys are just doing this retargeting thing, but I need a more holistic approach. I mean, that's just something to take into consideration. So I think being adaptable in kind of in every process, so as above, so below. So whether you're adaptable in your daily day-to-day work practices or adaptable as an organization to the market forces, you have to be thinking about that kind of all the time. And I think that's why it's important. And then in the long-term relationship side of things, what's really important there is that businesses are built on relationships, and relationships primarily with your customers or investors or advisors or whoever, and having a focus of building those meaningful relationships over time is really key. Doesn't mean you always have to be working with the person. Doesn't mean you always have to, be best buddies for life. But it does mean that you at least do the core things right in terms of adding value, caring about people, being respectful, and being committed to knowing that person for a long time, rather than, and sometimes it's best to describe this by the inverse, which is if you've ever been to a place where you've been sold something and you're like, wow, this guy is like super short-sighted. The used car salesman, unfortunately, is the archetype here. But like, are you that short-sighted where you're gonna, not give me the right deal or sell me something that's broken, where you don't recognize how much it's going to impact you down the road, or with your reputation or things like that. So sometimes it's better to describe long-term relationships by the inverse, which is the extremely short-sighted, I'm just going to hype this and sell this to you right now and then disappear type of person. We want to be the opposite of that.
Yeah. No, those are great insights. Well, Arjun, this has been an incredible interview. I have one last question for you here. What's the best advice that you have for any startups that's trying to grow? And I know that's a super vague question. I know there's no real way to answer it unless you're consulting one-on-one with them, and even then it's hard. But at the high level, what is the best advice you have for someone trying to grow a startup?
Yeah, I think it's to surround yourself with amazing people. And in every aspect of your startup, whether that is the investors, advisors, employees, customers, have a set of values, have a set of rules that you want to live by, and find those folks that are aligned. If you operate from a certain perspective in life, find investors and employees that operate from that perspective. If you find, and that's so critical, because once you have those people around you that are aligned from a values perspective. It doesn't have to be groupthink by any means, and there could be disagreement and discussion, but at the core, the value set has to be aligned across the entire universe of the people that you interact with, and that is super, super crucial, to say the least.
Yeah, in startup culture, it's so often that we focus on product. The product is this thing, and no one's saying the product doesn't matter, but throughout this interview, you keep bringing it back to the people. Yeah. And I think that there's something very wise about focusing on the people that are building the product and not skipping the people and thinking you can have a great product with the wrong people working on it and the wrong kinds of advisors and the wrong kinds of investors and the wrong kinds of customers. You get the people in place. To use Jim Collins' analogy, you get the right people on the bus, then you figure out where the bus is going. And I think there's really something to that. So
cool.
Well, Arjun, thank you so much for coming on Growth Hacker TV. It's been an incredible interview. I've learned a lot. I know people watching and listening are also learning a lot. So thank you.
Right. Thank you. My pleasure.